Hello everybody, Joel over here at ImportToss.com. Today we are going to do a step-by-step installation video of the lower ported intake manifold. So step-by-step, how to get the old one off and then get our new Elevate unit on. Stick around. So one thing you want to note before we start this installation video step by step is that we did a full product review, a side-by-side comparison of the stock factory unit and the Elevate unit. The link is here in the description. You may want to watch that first if you're looking to get some information about this. But if you're getting ready to install yours or want to know exactly how much it's going to take, then this is the video that you can start off with as well.
Step 1 is to remove the air intake. If you have the Elevate system, this is easy by simply removing the hose clamp where it connects to the mass airflow sensor and popping out. If you have the stock unit, it's going to be a little bit more difficult, but hopefully you are already familiar with that process. Next to do is to remove the vacuum lines that go into the upper inlet manifold. You will find one on the right side, which is a push-in clip. Be careful, as you can see here, that plastic tubing is a little brittle and I did lose a small chunk of it. Next, let's take a look at the upper intake manifold inlet on the bottom side. Here you are looking at the actual bolt holes. This is going to help you since you will not have much visibility when you are trying to remove those. So if you look across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the cylinder holes, you'll notice that there are small holes on the outside of those. Using that as a reference, you can reach under with your 5/16 socket and remove all of those bolts. Here we can see that the bolts are removed between the upper intake manifold and the lower intake manifold. And we see another one of our vacuum lines that needs to be removed. Go ahead and simply pull that off. At this point, your upper intake manifold is simply being held on by the throttle body and the hose that connects down to the intercooler. The easiest way to remove this is to loosen the clamp on the bottom side of the throttle body, and it will remove the hose, and then unplug the throttle body wiring harness to remove the entire unit as one piece. The last vacuum line we will see on the bottom of the left side. You can simply pull that off, and that will be the last thing holding the upper inlet manifold on. At this point, we can see that all we have left here is the lower inlet manifold. It's time to start working the things that need to be removed to get this off as well. Let's go ahead and start with the fuel rail. First thing you're going to do is look for 2 bolts, same spec size, 5/16, that hold the fuel rail to the lower inlet manifold. You may have to push back the wiring harness to get full access to those 2 bolts. Next, pull up forcefully. You can apply more pulling force on the left side of the fuel rail as it will come up, hinge over, and swivel, and it will land ultimately hanging up maybe close to the battery box. Be sure to check the injectors and make sure that you did not lose any of the O-rings or seals inside of the lower inlet manifold. Those need to be reused in order to make a good seal for your fuel injectors on the new lower inlet manifold. Next, we want to look at the actual lower inlet manifold and how it bolts up to the engine. There are going to be 6 bolts that need to come off, same spec size, and you'll notice on the lower portion that there are U-brackets for the bolts rather than full circles, which means you can remove the top 3 and then simply loosen the lower 3 and the intake manifold will still be able to come off. Here is a shot of all of those 6 bolts removed and our intake manifold, lower inlet manifold, hanging off. Now there are only 2 things to remove, and they are actually hoses for us to be able to pull the entire unit off of the car. The first hose is a breather hose that goes back into the middle of the valve cover. Here, we pulled it off and then we're able to fish it down through the inlet manifold. Lastly is this elbow-shaped foam hose that goes from the lower inlet manifold to the PCV system. This should slide off in no problem at all. Here is a final picture of the lower inlet manifold off. Last thing we have to do is pop off that old gasket and we are completely ready to go and start putting the new one in. Here's a tip that may help you. We found out the hard way. The elbow-shaped hose that goes from the lower inlet manifold back to the PCV system is impossible to put back on with the intake in place. So what you're going to want to do is make sure that you secure that elbow hose in between the two fittings and then slide the inlet manifold into place, and then that way it'll already be on when you start tightening your bolt. So, as we're wrapping up and you are looking at this final picture of the new Elevate lower inlet manifold installed, remember, when you're putting your fuel rail back on, make sure that you have all of your fuel injector gaskets on there. Obviously, you're going to use the new gaskets that are supplied by Elevate for both the inlet manifold to the engine, and on the other side, the lower inlet manifold to the upper inlet manifold. Be sure that you put everything back in exactly as you pulled it off, paying attention to proper torque spec. When you're all done, it should be ready to fire up and enjoy.